I was peacefully taking a shower when I noticed something strange. The side of my upper thigh was bleeding, but it wasn't just a cut. It was worse, far worse. I leaned in closer, my hand shaking as I touched the skin. A deep, jagged hole like something had torn through the flesh, leaving a raw, exposed wound. The edges weren't smooth, they were shredded, as if they had been gnawed or ripped apart. The skin around the hole was a sickly shade of pale, almost white like it had been drained of color, and blood pooled around the edges, dark and viscous. I froze, my breath catching in my throat. The pain was sharp but distant, like it didn't quite belong to me, like it was something I should have felt earlier but hadn't. I pressed my fingers into the hole, feeling the raw, soft tissue. Slick with blood, the water from the shower kept flowing, turning a disturbing shade of red as it mingled with the blood on the floor. The scene felt almost unreal, like I was standing outside of myself watching this horror unfold. I tried to pull my hand away, but my fingers were sticky with blood, clinging to the wound as if it didn't want to let me go. A wave of nausea hit me, my stomach turning, but I couldn't tear my eyes away from the gruesome sight. It wasn't right. This wasn't just an injury. This wasn't something that could happen by accident. I couldn't remember how it had happened, why it was happening. But the reality of it, the visceral horror of seeing my own flesh torn open like that, was impossible to deny. I stumbled back, my head spinning, feeling dizzy and disoriented. The cold water continued to run, mixing with the blood on the floor, but it did nothing to calm the rising panic that was choking me. My hand trembled as I reached for the towel, unable to shake the feeling that I wasn't just bleeding. I was being consumed by something darker than I could understand. As I was processing what had happened, I screamed for my husband, Steve, who quickly came running to help me. "What happened?" Steve asked, his voice cracking as his eyes fell on the huge wound on my body. I could see his skin lose color, his face going pale as if the blood had drained from him. His lips trembled, but his eyes were wide with panic. I could hear his breath getting shallow, his heart hammering so loudly it seemed to echo in the room. I watched him stumble back as if the sight of me was too much, too real. His hands shook as he gently moved me, trying to wrap me in a towel. He wasn't speaking anymore, just moving mechanically, as if he were on autopilot. His touch was cold, too cold for comfort, and I felt a strange distance between us, like I was drifting away from him. I couldn't help but wonder, was this real? Was this really happening? As Steve dressed me and hurriedly got me into the car to take me to the doctors, my 7-year-old son, Tommy, walked into the room. His small feet made almost no sound on the floor, and I didn't even realize he had entered until I saw him standing there, staring at me with wide, curious eyes. Tommy saw the wound. His eyes flicked over it briefly, but his expression didn't change. He didn't gasp, didn't flinch, didn't even blink. It was as if he was seeing something as normal as a scraped knee. No fear, no confusion, no concern. He didn't ask questions, didn't show a hint of worry. He just stood there, his hands casually clasped in front of him, like he was watching me as if nothing unusual was happening. His reaction, or lack of, haunts me to this day. It was almost as if he'd seen something like this before. It should have terrified me the way he acted, how calm and detached he was. But it wasn't the wound that left me shaken. It was the cold emptiness in his eyes, the fact that he didn't even think it was strange. As I got to the hospital, the nurse who saw my wound looked confused, but also strangely intrigued. "What happened?" she asked, her voice calm but tinged with disbelief. "I don't know," I whispered, still dazed. "I didn't even notice the wound until I took a shower." She frowned, her eyes narrowing as she examined me more closely. "You didn't notice something like that?" She shook her head, her expression turning from concern to doubt. "This isn't just a simple injury. This looks unusual." I couldn't understand what she meant, but the way she looked at the wound made my skin crawl. She cleaned it gently, her hands moving with care, but I could feel the weight of her gaze. She seemed almost fascinated, like this was some kind of puzzle she couldn't solve. After a long pause, she finally spoke again. "The wound, it looks like a laceration, but it's deep, and the edges are ragged, like something with a sharp, serrated edge tore through your skin. It could be an animal bite or maybe something mechanical." Her voice trailed off as though she was unsure herself. "An animal bite?" My mind raced. I couldn't remember anything. No animal, no sharp object, nothing. Felt like a bad dream, but I was awake and the wound was real. Too real. The day passed in a blur and we returned home, as I tried to settle into some semblance of normalcy. My husband Steve noticed something else that made my blood run cold. There was blood on the sheets. Not a lot, but enough to leave a dark stain on the fabric. "Whatever happened," he said, his voice tight, "was when you were sleeping. It must have been." His eyes flicked to me, and I could see the concern etched deep on his face. But there was something else there too, something I couldn't name. Fear. "Are you feeling any better?" Steve asked, his voice gentle, almost hesitant. "Yeah," I lied, forcing a smile, though every inch of my body was screaming at me. I wasn't feeling better. I wasn't sure I would ever feel better again. My fears were all gone as soon as I fell asleep. I woke up with a strange sensation of relief, as if the sleep I just had was liberating. Like I was somehow freed from whatever had been suffocating me. I didn't even remember the wound anymore. It felt as though it never existed. Steve wasn't there. He had woken up earlier than me to go to work. I sat on the edge of the bed, feeling almost brand new, as if I had been reborn overnight. I turned my body to position my feet on the floor, but when I went to stand up, crack! Terrifying, sickening sound, the kind you never forget. The floorboard splintered beneath me, and I collapsed, the impact jarring my entire body. I looked down at my feet. It was gone. A wave of cold panic flooded my chest. My fucking foot was missing. The spot where it should have been was just a raw, empty space. Some blood, no flesh. Just a jagged, smooth stump where my foot used to be. How? I tried to scream, but the sound wouldn't come. I couldn't comprehend it. I reached down, my hands trembling, trying to feel the phantom foot that should have been there. But all I touched was skin, soft skin, unnaturally cold. Like a part of me had been removed in my sleep. My stomach twisted in disgust. My mind refused to accept what I was seeing. I glanced at the sheets and my heart stopped. Something was there. Bones, foot bones, and blood. Flesh missing, pieces torn away as though something had violently stripped it from me while I lay unconscious. My own flesh, my own body. The stench of it all hit me, sharp and foul, and I couldn't stop my body from convulsing. The nausea rising in my throat, I backed away, stumbling over the remnants of my own body, unable to make sense of what I was seeing. Was this real? I could feel my pulse racing in my throat, my mind spiraling into chaos. That didn't make sense. How could I have lost a foot overnight? I closed my eyes, trying to steady myself. The questions were consuming me, but there was only one truth I knew. Something was horribly wrong, and I wasn't in control of it. Tommy came inside the room, holding his bunny toy tightly in his small hands. His eyes met mine, and I swear, for a brief moment, I saw something in them, something not quite right. It wasn't the innocent look of a child. No, it was colder. It was knowing. He smiled, but it wasn't a normal smile. It was unsettling. He stood there watching me, frozen in my fear, struggling to comprehend what was happening. His smile stretched wider, his eyes glinting in a way that made the hairs on the back of my neck stand up. "It's nice to see you happy, Mommy," he said, his voice too calm, too knowing. His words crawled under my skin like worms, and for a split second I couldn't breathe. Happy? How could he think I was happy? My foot was gone. I was bleeding. What the hell was he talking about? I opened my mouth to say something, but the words stuck in my throat. I couldn't even form a coherent sentence as I watched Tommy move slowly toward me. Every step he took seemed deliberate, as if he was savoring the moment, his gaze fixed on me. He stopped right in front of me, crouching down to my level. His fingers gripped the bunny toy tightly, his knuckles white with tension. He didn't flinch when his eyes dropped to the blood-stained sheets around me. I swear he didn't even blink. Then he slowly placed the bunny toy on the bed beside me. But there was something wrong with it. The fabric, once soft and clean, was now darkened. It was stained with something that wasn't just dirt. It was soaked in blood. The edges of the fabric frayed as though something sharp had torn through it. I couldn't look away from it. I felt a sharp pang in my stomach. Tommy tilted his head slightly, his smile still fixed in place. It was like he was studying me, waiting for me to react. But all I could do was stare, unable to move. "You're okay, Mommy," he whispered, So quietly I could barely hear him, but the words sank deep. "We just have to wait." I felt the room close. I finally managed to compose myself, but my body felt like it was falling apart as I tried to stand. My left foot felt heavy, and I was only able to hobble on the other. With every step, the raw pain from my wounds sent jolts through my body. As I slowly made my way toward the mirror, I couldn't avoid the horror that was about to unfold. I stared at myself. What I saw was beyond recognition. My skin was an unnatural, mottled color, half decayed, with patches of blood and open sores that hadn't been there before. My body was no longer just a wound. It was a decaying, living corpse. I couldn't even comprehend how far my flesh had rotted away. The wounds, they were more than just cuts. There were chunks missing, like pieces of me had been violently scraped off, leaving behind exposed, yellowed muscle and bone. My face was unrecognizable. The once smooth skin now hung loosely, discolored and wrinkled, as if someone had tried to peel it off. I could smell the rot. This time I knew I needed more than just medical help. I needed answers. I had to call the police. I had to understand what had happened to me. But even as I dialed, the confusion set in deeper. How could I not have noticed any of this? How could I have missed the fact that my body was being consumed piece by piece? There was no way this was normal. I couldn't trust myself. The ambulance arrived and the nurses were horrified. They wrapped my foot, but their expressions were blank, filled with disbelief. They kept asking the same question over and over, like they couldn't quite make sense of it. How had I lost my foot and not even realized it? The words echoed in my head, spinning. "I must have been drugged," I muttered. But even as I said it, it felt like a lie. No one was buying it. I was barely aware of time passing as I was transported to the hospital. My head was spinning, and I felt like I was floating through everything, detached from reality. Then I saw him, Steve. He looked frantic, his face pale as he rushed to my side. I wanted to reach for him, but the pain was unbearable, and my body was giving up on me. Before I could speak, the police were swarming the room. They started questioning me, their eyes wary. But there was something else there, confusion. Why was I still conscious? Why hadn't I noticed the damage being done to myself? The questions didn't stop. My thoughts were all over the place. I didn't know what was real anymore. But then something else happened. The police turned to Steve. Their tone changed. I heard the words "major suspect" and my mind spun. Suddenly, they arrested him right there in front of me. What the hell? My heart raced as the truth slammed into me. My husband, arrested for cannibalism. Cannibalism. The word reverberated in my ears, and everything went cold. How could this be? My own husband eating me alive. I wanted to scream to tell them they were wrong, but the words were trapped in my throat. I couldn't believe it. Steve would never. As they dragged him away, my mind raced. Something wasn't right. Why would they accuse him? Why now? I glanced at Tommy, who stood at the edge of the room. He was silent, his eyes empty, like he was in another world. It sent a chill down my spine. What if Tommy was somehow involved? He wasn't acting like my son anymore. He seemed different, out of control. I begged the officers to reconsider, but they wouldn't listen. They told me Steve was a threat, that he was dangerous, and they wouldn't release him until the investigation was over. They said it was for my own safety. My sister offered her house to me and Tommy, a place to stay after everything we'd been through. The air was thick with tension, and the silence between us was deafening. There were no long conversations, no gossiping, no laughter, not a single trace of happiness. My sister, who I once shared everything with, now looked at me with a mix of concern and fear. I could see it in her eyes, the way she tried to keep a distance from me, as if she could smell the decay on me, both physical and mental. "I can't believe Steve did this to you. I'm so sorry," she said, her voice trembling as she tried to comfort me. But the words hit me wrong. They didn't feel real. "Steve didn't do anything to me," I replied coldly. There was a venom in my voice that surprised even me. But it wasn't Steve, I knew that much. There was something else going on, something more sinister. Tommy was acting strangely too. He was quiet, but his discomfort was obvious. He didn't like my sister's house. He kept asking to go back home. I couldn't bear the thought of returning to the place where everything had gone wrong, especially without Steve. The house was empty. and it felt wrong to be there. But my sister's place had security cameras. If anything happened, at least I'd be able to see it, to prove Steve's innocence. I didn't want to sleep. Every part of my body ached with exhaustion, but the fear inside me wouldn't let me rest. What if something happened while I slept? What if I woke up dead? The thought didn't seem as crazy as it should. I'd already lost pieces of myself in ways I couldn't explain. My mind was unraveling, and I didn't know what was real anymore. I was scared of my own son. Tommy wasn't the same. He was different, corrupted. He watched me in a way that made my skin crawl. His eyes cold and distant. I couldn't bring myself to sleep next to him. Every part of me screamed that he could hurt me, even though I knew he was just a child. But the paranoia was too strong. He wasn't my Tommy anymore, and still, despite my fear, my body betrayed me. The painkillers I took earlier kicked in, making my eyelids heavy. I tried to fight it, but sleep dragged me down anyway. I managed to stand on one foot, the pain unbearable. My vision was blurry, and every step felt like I was being torn apart from the inside. I stumbled through the dark, falling multiple times but pushing myself up again each time, desperate to reach the room with the security cameras. When I finally reached the door, my hand shook as I gripped the doorknob. I could see my reflection in the polished surface, a grotesque, barely recognizable face staring back at me. My skin was stretched thin and mottled, hanging loosely in some places while other areas were raw and torn. My hair was sparse, falling in clumps. It looked like I had been ravaged by something monstrous. I shoved the door open and stumbled into the room. The video from last night began to play, flickering as the screen filled with static before the image settled. And then I saw it. The monster. It moved with a grotesque, inhuman grace. Its body twisted and malformed, half human, half something worse. Its jagged, trembling hands dug into my flesh with savage hunger, ripping it apart as if the very act of tearing was a need more primal than hunger itself. The sickening sound of flesh being torn away echoed in the room, each gnashing bite a violent, brutal noise that drowned out everything else. I could hear the wet snap of skin, the grotesque crunch of bone breaking, the desperate, hungry gulps as it swallowed chunks of what could only be pieces of me. The sound was unbearable, wet, slopping, tearing, as if the very fabric of my body was being shredded in real time. Every single bite felt like a piece of my soul was being consumed, each pull of its hands, leaving a trail of agony that seared through every nerve in my body. It wasn't just my flesh it tore at, it was everything. My insides twisted and writhed in horror as I watched it devour me, my skin falling away in strips, my muscle exposed in ghastly rawness, the blood, so much blood spilled out, a flood of crimson pooling on the floor as I gasped in horror. But the monster never stopped. Its mouth, God, the mouth, it stretched impossibly wide, wider than any human mouth could open, as it gorged itself, sucking down mouthfuls of my flesh. Each time it bit into me, it felt like my very bones were being pulled from their sockets. I could feel the sharp, excruciating pain of each bite, the pressure of its teeth sinking deep into me, the wetness, the warmth of my own blood trickling down my body. Felt like it was drowning me. The taste of my own body being consumed filled my senses with a nauseating, impossible feeling. I could almost hear it, my own blood being swallowed, my skin scraping away in agonizing waves of horror. I wanted to scream, but the terror had stolen my voice. Every part of me fought to move, to escape, but my body was failing. It was breaking apart, each piece of me becoming a feast for something that couldn't possibly be real, couldn't be happening. My limbs were being torn from me, my foot, my arm, pieces of my torso, and still, it devoured me, as if nothing mattered but the hunger. I could feel the blood rushing from me, could hear the cracking of bones, the tearing of flesh, the sounds of my body breaking apart under the relentless, mindless assault. I was drowning in it, the dark pit of terror pulling me down. The monster never stopped, never hesitated. It feasted on me with a twisted, insatiable hunger that made my insides writhe in horror. The worst part, the absolute worst part, was how calm it seemed. How it went about its grotesque meal without a single flicker of hesitation. There was nothing humane in that hunger. It wasn't just feeding, it was devouring me with the frenzy of something starved for years. A monster with no mercy. I felt the last remnants of my strength fading. My body could no longer fight. and my mind was collapsing under the weight of what was happening. There was no escape, no way out. Every movement it made, every tear of my flesh, every bit it consumed. It was all a reminder that this wasn't a nightmare. This was my reality and it would never end. There was no ending to this, only more. I would never escape. And then, with a sickening clarity, I realized the truth. The monster is myself.